Hotep, Black Power, giving honor to the Creator, giving honor to the ancestors. As always, giving honor to my sister, Chief of Staff, Brother Harris Abdul of the Street Law Soldiers, my father, my in-laws, and all of our ancestors and the brothers and sisters that are fighting for the liberation and salvation of our black nation today. What I want to talk about, I'm really disgusted right now. I'm so disgusted where I'm having shortness of breath. Damon Cresswell Bay, and I don't use this language, but I'm going to use it today. And this black bitch, his bitch, that sat there and filmed this nigga with a fucking erection, sodomizing an infant baby, making an infant give him oral sex, while this bitch is filming it on her fucking phone, and they put it on Facebook. Now, I didn't watch the film, but I saw a picture with the genitals and the baby's mouth blacked out, and that was enough for me. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what took place. Now, supposedly, both of those pieces of shit are in custody. But in a situation like that, they'll never be dead enough. And this nigga got a name Bay. He's supposed to be a so-called fucking Moor. And you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to condemn everyone that wears the fez. I'm not going to condemn all Moors based on what this nigga did. But I'll tell you this. I've seen during my time in prison, I've seen a lot of brothers fuck with homosexuals that were in the Moor Science Temple. And I'm going to leave that like that. But nevertheless, these two pieces of shit could never be dead enough. They should be taken out in public, set on fire, and chopped in pieces. And let the animals and jackals eat their bodies up and chew on their bodies. That's how, pissed I am at, and disgusted with some of these niggas that's supposed to be black. Niggas. But enough of that. I'm going to get off of that for right now. Today is Trayvon Martin. Tuesday, Trayvon Martin would have been 24 years old. As a result of this piece of shit, George Zimmerman took that brother's life from him. He would have been 24 Tuesday. Probably completing college, on his way to maybe working a law firm. Who knows? But this cracker took his life from him. And I'm gonna go into a whole lecture and show you some things pertaining to the murder of Trayvon Martin, of how his father, Tracy Martin, performed a Masonic ritual for the sacrifice of his son, Trayvon. I'm going to show you the photos. I'm going to show you all that the next lecture that I do. So, because I like to have the proof of things. So, but anyway, this motherfucking cracker became a millionaire for killing a black child. Became a millionaire. His legal fees were paid for through GoFundMe and PayPal. by white supremacists and other devils, and even some niggas. And then Charles Barkley is going to sit there and say that he agreed with the jury's decision in finding George Zimmerman innocent. But y'all sit there and watch Charles Barkley, make fun of his own people. He's married to a white dog. They do anything they want to Charles Barkley. He's the step and fetch it of the NBA commentators. They make him wear dresses, wigs. He wears fingernail and toenail polish. They do whatever they want to him. He's the buffoonery, homosexual clown of the NBA commentators. Along and right behind him is Stephen A. Smith. But nevertheless, he snuffed out Trayvon Martin, and which was very, very upsetting. Now let's talk about a few things. Trump still talking about that fucking wall, right? Still talking about the wall. Excuse me 1 second. Yeah, like I was saying, Trump wants to build, he's still talking about this fucking wall, and fucking Flint, Michigan is still fucked up. Actually, the entire Michigan, the state is fucked up. Flint, Michigan still drinking piss water, but he talking about a motherfucking wall. And we're not saying nothing. We'll just sit there. The black church had, who endorsed this motherfucking nut. However, he's the only president that has outright spoken about what really takes place in the minds of the average political devil. And so we can say what we want, because once again, 2018 is a year of transparency. You're gonna, everything's gonna come out from the dark to the light. So you better make sure your karma is on point, and make sure you be as honest as you possibly can into revealing who you really are. As you walk, as you travel, out and about in the universe, make sure you are the best you that you can possibly be. Don Cornelius was on my mind. As we know, Don Cornelius was murdered for the simple reason that the Jews, the so-called white imposter Jews, wanted to buy Soul Train and take the soul out of Soul Train, and make it fucking, Jew Train or I don't know, Israel Train. I don't know what they wanted to do, but the Jews wanted to take over Soul Train, and Don Cornelius refused to give in. And then all of a sudden, he's found with 2 so-called self-inflicted gunshot wounds to his head. He was murdered. He was murdered. Real simple. Real simple. Also, I wanted to show y'all that nothing has changed for those who have think so much has changed. The picture behind me is supposed to be the remains of a human being, a 15-year-old boy, Jesse Washington, who was shot over 100 times, beaten with bricks, castrated, set on fire. And while he was on fire, he was trying to climb up the tree to take the fire off of him, and they cut his fingers off so he wouldn't be able to brush the flames off his body. And this is at 15 years old. So when we talk about, that yes we can shit that Obama, trick everybody with, trick all you sleeping slaves that, yes we can. It was just using the wrong terminology. Who is going to, rectify and avenge this little boy's death, his murder? No one. I want to touch on this brother here, Frankie Lymon, who was indeed one of the greatest black child entertainers ever in history, and who died of a drug overdose, a heroin overdose, in his grandmother's bathroom at the age of 26. And this brother was so far ahead of his time, that he wasn't able to get a grip on who he really was, and the potential and the power and the God energy, and the frequency, the high frequency that he was on, because he had a serious vibration, and Brother Panic had stated several years back that Frankie Lymon came to him in a dream and told him that, he took himself out on purpose so Michael Jackson could come on. Because the same year Frankie Lymon passed, the Jackson 5 came several months later with their first album, the ABC or whatever, I Want You Back album, whatever their first album was. And they both had the same type of songs. They sung those kitty lollipop songs, Rockin' Robin, Goody Goody, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, I Want You Back, ABCs. Both of them had songs called Frankie's was the ABCs of Love, and the Jackson 5s was just ABC. And they both had the same voice pitch. Both of them were phenomenal dancers, and I truly believe that. Frankie Lymon, the movie that they made about him, the Why Do Fools Fall in Love, which Lorenz Tate played Frankie Lymon, was a piece of shit. Because all they showed was, to make Frankie Lymon appear that he was just this, dragged out, strung out junkie, that all he done was pawn and hawk shit and beg money from his so-called manager. His last name, I think his last name was Levy. He was a so-called white Jew, in which he sold all Frankie's masters back to him for a mere measly $1,500. Which they're worth millions now, hundreds of millions of dollars. And how, his supposedly 3 wives, and how they all popped up out of the woodwork when they found out, it was a possibility they could get a few dollars. And I could understand the sister that was, incarcerated. She may have needed some money to get on her feet, but the Zola Taylor, who was the former female lead singer for the Platters, who always thought she was a cut above Frankie Lymon, and Frankie went out his way and spent a lot of money trying to enamel her in so much gold and glitter and whatnot. And she wasn't nothing, you know. I saw some footage of her. She was doing a concert in the 90s. She weighed close to 300 pounds, and she was on a cane or crutches and or wheelchair or something. And you know, it goes to show you, you know, when you know you think you know so much better than the rest of the than the rest of the pack. You know that the Creator and the ancestors have a way to bring your ass back down to earth. So that was the situation with her, Zola Taylor from the Platters. You know, let me show you something. Here, I also want to talk about the Richard Pryor book, you know, and you know all the men that Richard Pryor slept with. You know, he had no problem in discussing, you know, during the 70s, all the wild sex that they had with you know, with that Richard Pryor had with several men, Marlon Brando, Marvin Gaye, you know, Gene Wilder, James Baldwin, Quincy Jones, Paul Mooney, and you know, this was told, you know, by his wife Jennifer, you know, who, you know, was a white woman who slept around herself, and you know, Pryor was very abusive, and he talked about, you know, that he thought he was by himself with those particular issues, even though, you know, Quincy Jones slept with all these guys too, including Michael Jackson. But he said when he saw Dizzy Gillespie get yanked up by the collar by Miles Davis, and Miles Davis stuck his tongue down Dizzy Gillespie's throat, that's when Richard Pryor realized that this bisexual, this Greco-Roman behavior that runs rampant in Hollywood, you know, even today, probably more prevalent today, that he wasn't alone, because he just thought, you know, it was just him and the cocaine. But, you know, that cocaine brought the, you know, the freak out of all these, you know, the I'm every woman out of all of them. But it kind of surprised me in a way about Marvin, you know, because Marvin talked about his uncle, you know, waking him up as a teenager and penetrating him, you know, in the bathroom in the middle of the night. And he was afraid to tell. So, you know, but Marlon Brando, who was just, you know, just a wild, he was a wild fag who all of them were fags, because if you participate in that type of behavior, you are a fag. You know, don't get it twisted. I'm just trying to speak a little formal about the situation, but don't get it twisted. They all fags. And you all know how I feel about that homosexuality shit. You know, totally against that bullshit. However, you know, Marlon Brando, you know, now I see why he hung around the Panthers so much. You know, I don't know if Huey was, you know, or Huey wasn't fucking with him. Eldridge Cleaver was fucking with Marlon Brando, because, you know, Eldridge Cleaver, when he went into exile, went to Algiers, he became a born-again Christian, but also he was a designer of women's clothing, you know, and they said that he was, you know, the purse and sandals, the whole kit and caboodle, you know, the whole RuPaul starter kit over there when he was in Algiers. But, you know, it was said that, you know, he and Marlon Brando, you know, they did the California mudslide before he went over to Algiers. So, and you look up to these people, because I know, it was that was special to somebody, when I was little, for somebody to have a Richard Pryor album, and you're going, you go over somebody's basement, and you listen to it, listen to Richard Pryor, because that's how bad he was, because nobody ever literally blasted Richard Pryor's Richard Pryor's albums, on their stereos. That was something like when you had Private Party or something like that, and if you just want to go in the basement and just laugh, have company over or whatever, and but now, that type of lingo and dialogue is just, little children are using that same lingo, that same dialogue. You got children using it in movies, saying fuck and smoking cigarettes at 12 and things of that nature. So it's real it's real wild how and out of control that we have become over the years. So Gladys Knight, 74, 75 years old, she just got cosmetic surgery done to her face, and she looks like a somewhat of a hummingbird, looks like a baby eagle in the face, because she's too old, and she's fortunate and should be blessed that she didn't, go into cardiac arrest by being put under like that, at that age, just for the purpose of because they really chiseled and cut on her face, and she should be thankful that she didn't, once again go into cardiac arrest by, being at that age, being put under and then being, scraped with that knife and being cut up like that, because she looks like a baby eagle, and she was better off the way she was, and the $1 million question is, who is she trying to win over by going through all of this shit? They also they advertise KY jelly. These crackers are vicious. They actually advertise ass jelly on TV. And promoting anal sex, because that's what it was originally designed for, and as a mild lubricant for vaginal intercourse. But mainly, KY jelly was for anal sex, because it wasn't it wasn't commercial. It wasn't commercialized. No one knew you had it if you did have it. And if you did have it in your bedroom, the first thing people will be under the assumption that you was a fucking punk, that you were getting ass fucked, and you were a fucking faggot, But now it's so commercial and wide open, you don't know who's who. You really don't. Really don't. And we're going to get on that prison industrial complex too. Excuse me, 1 second. That prison industrial complex, which actually started with President Eisenhower when he started to create, these interstates, 95 and these super highways during his term in the White House, in which he was a straight devil, along with Truman. Truman, who sent brothers to Korea. My father went over in Korea, was shot in the head, but and just like Dr. Umar Johnson had stated several years ago about the prison industrial complex, that when our males are in the third grade, they already have a prison bed. They already count and make a prison bed space for that young child, based on the fact that they are predicting that he doesn't complete high school, that he will commit some sort of crime during his adolescence, teenage, or pre-adult years, and will end up being in the penitentiary. And this is what they're doing and projecting the future of our babies. And we're not helping them. We're not helping them any more. We're not doing any more for them. We're just as destructive to them as this goddamn cracker, because what do? We don't confront them. The fathers are out of the home, based on that was systematically designed, through welfare, through Section 8, through the prison industrial complex, where felony conviction will just take you out of the workforce and have you under the private sector if you're lucky, which you will not make an adequate salary to provide for your wife and children. So you will have to find some type of part-time job or another source of income to make ends meet. And most of the brothers, they go to the underworld, and once they are arrested for any type of possession of any narcotics, then that really scars them for the rest of their life. That's why I say this stuff is set up like this for our destruction, for our personal destruction. Planned Parenthood, where they encourage our young sisters to get abortions. They give out Six Flag tickets to go see a basketball game or a football game. If you get rid of your baby. And then when they talk about all the brothers are locked up, that's why these homes are fatherless. No, the homes are primarily fatherless because the abortions. Millions of black males have been aborted within the last 10 years. Millions. And we're not doing anything about it. And we're allowing this devil to tell us that for our young queens to give birth and bring life on this planet is wrong. And that killing your child is the best way to go. So you can still be able to hang out, be promiscuous, sexually, and possibly contract or give someone an STD. Because the HIV AIDS is running rampant in the black community once again. And if you're not careful, you can be one of those who will be on the death payment plan. And You know, and that's the self-hatred that runs through the black community. You don't want nothing that you don't want to give life to nothing that resembles you because you hate yourself. Same thing Cheryl Underwood did, you know, on national television. You know, made all these derogatory statements about, you know, black hair, you know, that it's nappy and, you know, that, you know, it's best to, you know, go blonde. You know, get a blonde horse's ass weaved and sewed in your fucking head. You know, with a damn crochet needle. It's a damn shame. And we're not getting any better. Matter of fact, we're getting worse. We're getting worse. We're moving, you know, down 2018. We're moving down at a pace where if we're not careful, you know, we're gonna slip and bust our brains wide open. I don't know if I mentioned this. Maybe I did or maybe I didn't. Brother Ice-T was shot in a club Tuesday night. You know, shot in the chest, supposedly. You know, now I believe I saw it on TMZ and I saw it a couple other places, but I'm hoping, you know, that it's a tabloid because I don't wish that on the brother. However, you know, he was arrested and they ran his house for, I believe, these performance enhancing drugs that I believe he was selling. And they tried to make it look like, you know, he had some bricks of keys of coke or whatever. But that's how they do us. That's exactly how they do us. You know. So, brothers and sisters, I'm going to go and check out some things, and I'll be back with you all with some more information. I hope that I provided some information to you. I hope you're getting something out of my videos. You know, let me know. Go in my comment box. You know, be mature, you know, when you go into anyone's comment box. You know, whether you respectfully agree or disagree. You know, but be respectful for yourself. And so, till again, Hotep, Black Power.